So, anybody follow their horoscope? A little thing in the newspaper? Yeah, there you go. A little thing in the newspaper that kind of tells you what your future is going to be based on the alignment of the stars and the planets on the day that you were born. Well, that's kind of following a star, isn't it? Our little star constellations. Well, we're not going to talk about horoscopes today, but we are going to continue to talk about our series this month for the Christ consciousness within us all. And we're continuing with that traditional nativity story with the metaphysical twist on it, looking at some ways that we can make these stories more relevant in our life today, perhaps, than maybe what we were told earlier in our lives about their meanings. And today we are going to, my talk is following a star, and we're going to talk about the three wise men who followed a star from the east. And this part of the story is only found in the book of Matthew. It's in the 2nd chapter, and it's only 12 verses, verses 1 through 12. That's it. It's no place else in the Bible. And yet we have all of this story with the three wise men, or the three kings, whatever we want to call them, and the three gifts and all this stuff.
Three wise guys.
Three wise guys, yeah. So let's look at what that actually says, and then we're going to talk about it, okay? So after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. That's what it says. Now, if we try to make sense out of that logically, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? There's a few details missing, a few questions that we might have there. But that's the beauty of story. We can make it mean what we choose to make it mean, right? Many of us, myself included, received teachings growing up about what that story meant and the interpretation of it. But again, I want to look at maybe some metaphysical thoughts around that and how we might be able to shift those ideas. So let's look at the first part. We're told that it is a time of rule of a guy named King Herod in Jerusalem, and that Magi from the east saw a star and followed it. Pretty simple. Paints a nice picture. But what about this King Herod guy? What's the importance of his character being in this story? Well, we can almost hear his evil little voice like the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz. "I'll get you, my pretty. Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. Or send my flying monkeys after him." Right? Yeah. But we mainly hear about Herod. What we mainly know about him is what? He was mean. He was brutal. He was a really brutal type of king. But historically, he really did exist. Historically, he was known for his big, massive building projects. He built a lot of big buildings and things during his time. But what we really know him for, again, is that brutality, because he did that thing called the Massacre of the Innocents. Remember that part? That he was so worried about this king of the Jews that had been prophesied and now had been born, supposedly, that he said, "Let's just kill all the little boys 2 years and younger. We'll take care of that problem." That's brutal, isn't it? But so what do you think is really going on? What does he really represent for us in this story? Represents our ego, doesn't it? He represents our ego. Now, we could say that it's the good and evil, the devil and God, again, doing their old dance, but we don't teach a lot of stuff about the devil or evil around here, so we're going to call this thing ego. We're going to call this ego because that's what happens. His ego is so afraid of this infant child that had been born that it was going to become powerful and grow up and be a man and challenge him at some point, that he said, I'll just take care of that. And his fear came up, and he wiped out a whole generation. Now, we know in the story that Joseph had a dream, and he took Mary and Jesus, and they went to Egypt for a while, which is kind of cool because it's kind of that turn the other cheek and don't be into resistance, right? That's another cool part of the story, but that's not part of our story today. So if we think about our ego and our own fears coming up, we sometimes want to send our flying monkeys out too, don't we? To protect ourselves, self-preservation. Yeah, our self-preservation. And if we are unaware of that, if we're just in reactive mode and we're unaware of that, that's when we can have real problems, right? When our flying monkeys can create some issues for us. So if you doubt this, I would invite you to turn on your television. Television shows play this story out. Movies play this story out. News, media, and real life plays this out. Our world leaders play this out. They're always sending flying monkeys out somewhere, aren't they? Yeah. So it's something that we continue to see. It's part of a human story almost, isn't it? And I think that's why these older stories, these ancient stories, resonate with us, is because it's part of that, almost that archetype of us and how we show up sometimes, we being human race. So we have a star rising. And they say the star is rising in the east. Well, we all know this time of year, the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. We're in the last 11 shortest days of this cycle, right? We got the solstice coming up on the 21st. Sorry, Jim, the sun's coming back. Jim and I have a conversation. He likes the shorter days, I like the longer days. But yeah, so this is representing that time. So the star was coming from the east, so metaphysically they're talking about the light is coming back. And then that also relates to Jesus being the light, bringing the light, shining the light on the old for the new thought, the new thinking, the new consciousness, the new awareness, right? And the wise men, this acted as a guide for them. It acted as a guide for them. And so that guiding principle is translated as our intuition. We all have a star within us that guides our way. We all have that star within us that guides our way. Ernest Holmes is the author of The Science of Mind, the book that we teach from, and he's also the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living. And he defines intuition as God in man revealing to him the realities of being. God in man revealing to him the realities of being. And doesn't this support that story? That they followed their intuition, the star, to find God in man, which is the story of Jesus. God revealed in man, God is within. So it all supports that same idea. But on the way, what happened? They ran into Herod, King Ego. And doesn't that represent our own resistance to our own divinity within? We think we can control in the world of effects external to ourselves, when really, if we're that transparency of the divine, like Goldsmith says, we aren't in resistance. We aren't in resistance to our own divinity. We allow it to show and shine forth. Yeah. So those wise men, a little history on that. There's some scholars out there that are presuming that the Magi were Zoroastrian priests. Zoroastrian priests. And Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest existing religions that we know about on the planet. And it's attributed to an Iranian prophet named Zoroaster. And some of its major beliefs are Messiahism, heaven and hell, and free will. So we can see that influence in Second Temple Judaism, Gnosticism, Christianity, and Islam, and also in that teaching of Jesus, can't we? Heaven is within. Free will, it is done unto us as we believe. All those basic tenets. So these stories are just steeped in what is to become the future teaching, which is really fun to dissect and pull out of when we can step out of the traditional story that we've been told. Ernest Holmes says about the wise men, he says the wise men of the East represent the intellect, which goes in search after truth. And that intelligence in all of us, which knows that God is not far off, that something within us which feels with a feeling deep as life itself, that the holy babe of Bethlehem is born in each of us anew. That the holy babe of Bethlehem is born in each of us new. That's every day when we wake up, right? Don't we have a choice when we wake up in the morning what kind of day we're going to have? Yeah. And are we conscious of that, though? Not always. We kind of get up and get on autopilot, right? Go get the coffee, go meditate, get ready, drive to the office, right? Rather than consciously saying, oh my goodness, I have another day of life on planet Earth that I can choose to be in glorious expression of the divine. I mean, there's so much that we can do to set the tone for our day when we first get up and move through that morning, those morning hours. So every day, that Christ consciousness born afresh and born anew. Well, our story goes on that when the Magi arrived, they found the baby Jesus, and they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Well, there's a lot of speculation about what the gifts mean, and the story, if you think back at what the words said, if you were listening and taking notes, the story just says the Magi. It doesn't say that there were 3 of them. Now we have made up that there were 3 because there were 3 gifts. Maybe not. Maybe there was 33. Maybe there was one person that it was like Santa Claus and had lots of gifts. Right? But we have made our story around 3 Magi who came, each one bearing an individual gift. I find that fascinating. And we historically know that the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh were considered very valuable back in that time. And they were standard gifts that were given to honor kings and deity. It was a standard gift because they were considered so valuable. Gold, of course, is still valued today, right? And then frankincense is used as perfume or as incense. And myrrh is an anointing oil. And remember last week we talked about anointing and how when someone was anointed, it was that they were chosen of God to their position, whether it be in the priesthood or in royalty, and that the royals of England still are anointed at their coronations by a priest and not crowned by someone in government. So the anointing oil. So those are the symbolic meanings around those gifts. And Jesus is not the only receiver of those gifts. As we said, other kings were, and other royalty. And historically, we've found ancient inscriptions that those same 3 gifts were offered by kings to the god Apollo back in 243 BCE, 243 years before this birth of Jesus. So they were just really special gifts, not just for the one individual. And for us, we know this as our tradition of giving Christmas presents, right? That's kind of where that comes from, along with some other traditions. But what other valuable gifts are you giving this year? What other valuable gifts are you giving this year? Compassion, kindness, love, joy, peace. Yeah. And we are new members. We have members of the community that being a good steward is giving service, isn't it? Giving service at this time of year. Last week we gave gifts of service to Amos, our adopted senior that we adopted. We've assembled, addressed cards for 75 blessing bags for our homeless population. Anybody been handing those out? Very rewarding, yes. Yes, I handed one out on Friday. So we are being of service. And our talents and volunteering, our time, talent, and treasure to this community. And I'm going to acknowledge Joe Hammer this morning a little bit. He doesn't know this is coming. Joe has been with us pretty much since day one. And has volunteered his talent, his amazing talent in business and marketing skills, to create our website, 2 of them, our website and our flyers, our advertising, our promotionals, our forms, our sign-up sheets and everything you see out there, all the things that go in our packets and so forth. That's all Joe being of service and volunteering his talents and his time to this community. So that's a beautiful gift. Thank you for sharing that talent with this community. Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, if we have these talents and gifts that we're not sharing with the world, and not necessarily the center, I'm just saying with the world that we're not sharing, it's kind of like those illuminated signs with the one letter out. Just ruined my punchline here. I wondered what Santa did with the elves in the off-season, right? Whatever. All right, so our talents are those special gifts that we bring, that only we can bring in our unique expression of our divinity. You know, somebody else can do marketing, but it's not Joe's marketing. Somebody else can pray for me, but it's not Lori's prayer or Suzanne's prayer or Joanne's prayer, right? What if Renee had not said yes to singing, to acting, to having the courage to stand on that first stage of hers and open her mouth and allow that talent to come forward? What would we be missing here today? So what gift are you not sharing? The world needs you. Share your gifts with the world. We have some very beautiful gifts in our community, and they are called practitioners of religious science. And these beautiful prayer partners have each invested at least 180 hours in preparation to be qualified to take the practitioner licensing class, which is another 180 hours. Usually takes about 4 years of study. Usually takes at least 4 years of study to get there. And then each one has to pass a written exam and then sit before a panel of their peers and answer questions before they are awarded a license through the Centers for Spiritual Living. They're all licensed out of the home office in Golden. And then they can choose where they would like to be of service in any of our centers, anywhere. And I am honored and delighted that these 3 beautiful ladies have chosen to share their gifts and their talents with us here at Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living. And today we're going to honor our practitioners of religious science in our community with a recommitment of their vows to their practitioner presence. So I'm going to invite them by name to all come up here. Suzanne Gildersleeve, Lori Frisbee, and Joanne Cook. Ladies, you have chosen a pathway in life that is and ever shall be rich in interest and fulfillment with beautiful spiritual discoveries. To serve as a professional practitioner is to lead those who look to you for spiritual guidance into an assurance and an acceptance of the wholeness of spirit, soul, and body. For this work you are well prepared. Your deep understanding of life's principle of human nature, your compassion and warm empathy will be called upon by those who look to you for the living demonstration of our teaching and our practice of spiritual mind healing. You have been licensed as a professional practitioner of the healing methods of the science of mind and by the authority of Centers for Spiritual Living. Therefore, it is right and fitting that you pledge your alignment and your allegiance to the teaching, the methods, and to Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living, in whose name you will perform your healing art. Today, you rededicate yourselves by repeating the vows that you did when you were originally licensed. Do you therefore give your unqualified loyalty and support to Centers for Spiritual Living and agree to live by the principles of this center to the best of your ability? I do. Do you agree to abide by the policies and regulations which govern a professional practitioner of the Centers for Spiritual Living? Do you rededicate yourself to faithful meditation and diligent study in order that you may expand the consciousness of your professional practice? Do you rededicate yourself to do your utmost to reflect at all times the Spirit of truth? Do you recommit yourself to absolute confidentiality, keeping inviolate the identity and confidence of those who come before you unless you receive their explicit consent to do otherwise? As a loyal and supporting member of Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living, will you uphold and support this center and the Centers for Spiritual Living through spiritual mind treatment? Do you feel in your heart that you are qualified and prepared to serve as a professional practitioner of religious science? I do too. These vows of dedication which you have assumed are only the outward expression of an inner dedication and consecration to the indwelling presence which you have already made. Through this act, you place yourself in a very special relationship to God and to all people. Your mission is to recognize the deep and abiding harmony at the center of everything, to see through the existing circumstances and affirm the truth that sets each person free. In the fulfillment of your mission, you have the same assurance expressed by the great Master. It is the Father within who does the work. The infinite Spirit which empowers you to do all things also grants you the strength and wisdom to faithfully fulfill your vows. By the authority invested in me as an ordained minister of Centers for Spiritual Living, I celebrate and confirm your dedication as practitioners of Centers for Spiritual Living. It is now my privilege to present to you the symbol of beauty and perfection. Tony has a rose for you, and I have a small gift for each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie. Oops, I gave you Lori's.
Oh, I'll take Lori's.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm so blessed.
You are. You are so blessed. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our practitioners of religious science. Wonderful. All right. Special day in our community, yes? Honoring our practitioners and our new members. It's all good stuff. So, what beautiful gifts they are, yes? Yes. Beautiful gifts in our community. They do so much for us. So our tale of the Magi, the wise men, is filled with that mystical and metaphysical. And last week we met the shepherd, representing us watching our thoughts, shepherding our thoughts, right? Remember that? And then today, the Magi represent the intellect and following the intellect and exploration. So you could pretty much say this part of the Nativity is science of mind, right? Yeah. Both the intellect and the heart should recognize the presence of God in all. So let's look at how we might recognize the presence of God in all ourselves this week in our practicing the principles. Number one, we are wise men and wise women. We are wise men and wise women. Use, test, and trust your intuition. As Holmes says, intuition is God within us. However, sometimes that king ego shows up, right? We all have that little guy in there. We need to learn the difference between intuition and ego and learn to trust the divine. Learn to trust the divine wisdom. Like the example of the wise men following the star. They trusted, didn't they? Number two, follow your star. What destination, dreams, and desires are you being led to? Like the wise men were being led to the new thought, the new consciousness, the new light. What are you being led to? Recognizing that those dreams, desires that come through us are really an expression of spirit pushing through us and the creativity of life saying, go forth and create. Create. Trust those dreams. Follow your guiding star, knowing that it too is sourced of spirit. Number 3, share your precious gifts. Share your precious gifts. And we all have precious gifts to share with the world. And again, think of some of the ones that you have received. Renee's beautiful voice, the things that Joe does for us here, our beautiful practitioners. What if we didn't receive those? Be like that sign. You'd have elf storage instead of self-storage. The world needs you to give generously of your talents, of your gifts. So I want to close this today with a quote by our founder, Ernest Holmes, where he's talking about this story of the Magi. And he says, shall we not remember this ageless story and seek to apply it to our everyday living? Should not Christ be born in us today? If we permit this divine incarnation to take place, shall we not also feel the presence of angelic forces and listen to the celestial song? The song of the ages, peace on earth, goodwill to all. And that's really what it's about this time, isn't it? It's really what it's about. Peace on earth, goodwill to all. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you to our new members. We are delighted to have you join us, and also to our beautiful practitioners and the amazing gifts that you share with us. So I invite you to anchor with me in affirmative prayer. So recognizing that there is only one power, one presence in the universe, and that power and that presence is the divine. It is God. It is source, presence, essence. It doesn't matter what we call it. We just know it as the beloved within. And all of it is here now present, in, through, and as me, as an individualized expression of it, and in, through, and as each one of us here, and each one that's in the sound of my voice. For we know that we are all individualized and unique expressions of the one. Just like we had individual candles here today with an individual wick, they were all lit from that one flame. So from that place of unity and that place of knowing, I speak my word for and about each one of us here today, knowing, claiming, and accepting the wisdom that resides within each of us as wise men and women. That we too are sourced of that divine intelligence of God in us. That we have our own inner star to guide and lead us. And that the gifts that we have, that are ours and ours alone, the world is hungry for. Hungry for us to share our gifts, not only in this holy day season, but throughout the year. So I would speak a special word of blessing this day on our friends in California and all that they have been experiencing this week, and yet another firestorm on our planet. I know calm winds, moisture in the air, and divine right action. So it is with great gratitude, great joy, great thanksgiving for the manifestation of this prayer that I simply let it be. I release it into the activity of mind, into the action of law, knowing that it is done. And we affirm this together by saying,